A global crisis doesn't just change how we live. It can quietly rewire something as fundamental as the news itself. Today, we're going to dive into exactly that. We'll look at how the pandemic gave governments a brand new playbook for controlling the story. And our case study, it's a fascinating one, the Indonesian Presidential Palace. So it all boils down to this, right? During a major crisis, who really controls the story? The pandemic just blew up all the old rules between governments and journalists. I mean, when you can't be there in person, who's in charge of the narrative? We're about to see exactly how that power struggle went down in Indonesia. Okay, so to really get how big of a deal this was, we've got to go back. Let's take a look at what normal looked like for journalists covering the president before everything changed. So back in the day, it was all about one thing: access. Journalists covering the palace, they thrived on being close to the action, having those informal chats. They could pull an official aside for what's called a doorstop interview, basically an unplanned, on-the-fly Q&A in a hallway. And that's where the real magic happened. That's how you build trust, how you get the story that's not in the official press release. And then, bam, the pandemic hits, and it just blows up that entire system. This table really shows you the before and after in black and white. Just look at the difference. Face-to-face meetings? Gone. Replaced by, Zoom calls where you can't read the room. And here's the kicker. Look at that third row. The government's control over questions, it went from pretty loose to totally locked down. The press release, which used to be just a jumping-off point, suddenly became the only story. I mean, suddenly, the doors were literally slammed shut. With all the health rules and social distancing, journalists were just locked out. And this wasn't some small problem. This was a massive threat to how they do their jobs. To actually report, to investigate, and to keep power in check. So this lockdown creates a huge problem, right? You've got journalists who are desperate for news, and at the same time, the government has to get its message out about the pandemic. It was this mutual desperation that led the palace's PR team, called the BPMI, to come up with a really clever and powerful news strategy. And what they did is something that experts call an information subsidy. Now, this is a total game changer. Think about it like this. What if the government just packages up the news for you? They give you the quotes, the pictures, the data, all ready to go, and hand deliver it to newsrooms. It basically cuts out all the time and money it takes to do your own reporting. And we're not talking about just a standard press release here. No way. The BPMI started giving out what was essentially a news meal kit. I'm talking super fast text releases, like within 30 minutes. Full photo packages, we're talking 30 photos per event, all with captions. They'd give you the link to the live video stream, and they'd send over a slick edited video summary, basically the whole shebang. And this quote from a journalist, wow, it really gets right to the point. He says, "If we did not get the press release, we would not write any news, so we waited for it." You have to remember, newsrooms were already struggling with layoffs and budget cuts, so for them, this pre-packaged content from the government wasn't just helpful, it was a lifeline. It was just so much easier and frankly safer to just wait for the official package to arrive. Okay, so this setup might sound convenient, right? But it wasn't just about making things easier. It actually changed the very nature of journalism, and it led to a new, much more controlled public story. Think about it. When you can't get in the door to check things for yourself, you become totally dependent. And journalists started to find themselves in a new role. Their jobs started to shift from, actively digging for a story to pretty much just processing the information they were being fed. And this is a phenomenon that researchers have a name for: protocol journalism. It's this idea that the press is in danger of becoming, less of a watchdog and more of a court reporter. They're just reporting the official events, the speeches, the press conferences, the ceremonies, often without being able to add that critical analysis or deeper context. Now, if you're the government, this is an absolute masterstroke. By handing out all the raw materials for the news, you can basically make sure that everyone, all the major media outlets, are singing from the same hymn sheet. They're all broadcasting your message, unified and consistent. This diagram here, it perfectly lays out how they did it. It's this really smart, powerful cycle. Look, it starts with controlling the information. That control makes journalists dependent on you. And once they're dependent, you get the grand prize. You get to set the entire agenda for public conversation. It was, step by step, a complete takeover of the story. So you might think, okay, the crisis ends, things go back to normal, right? Well, not exactly. This system, which was created in an emergency, it didn't just vanish. In fact, it looks like it may have caused a permanent shift in the power balance between the press and the government. And at the heart of this new normal is a major disagreement. On one side, you have the government's PR team, the BPMI. They love this new, formal, highly controlled relationship. But on the other side, you have the journalists, and they're saying, hey, without those informal, off-the-record chats we used to have, we can't do our jobs right. We can't give people the context they need. And because this new model was working so well for them, the government's PR team came to a pretty shocking conclusion. They realized they didn't really need the press as much anymore. And with that realization, they actually started cutting back on the number of journalists who had full-time access to the palace. And this number right here, this is a huge reason why they felt so confident. By the middle of 2022, the president's own YouTube channel had over 2 million subscribers. Think about that. Why would you bother going through a journalist to get your message out when you can just push a button and speak directly to 2 million people? So all of this leaves us with a really big and kind of scary question that goes way beyond just Indonesia. When a crisis hits, does the press, the so-called watchdog, end up becoming just a megaphone for the government? What the pandemic showed us is this really delicate balance between getting access and staying independent. And it makes you wonder, what's the real cost where information is free but comes from only one source? And more importantly, is that a price a democracy can really afford to pay?